tell us a little bit about the Civil War history of her homestead here.
I'm very proud of our part that we played in the Civil War. My family of the Browns, on the Brown side, we did not own slaves at all. You see, don't forget, we were the pioneer farmers, and we still remain farmers, but on my grandmother's side, Davis's, Anna of the Gorsuch, it lives near Sykesville, they did have slaves. I like to say this to you about people who had slaves. You've heard many wrong statements, I think. But those people who did have slaves really cared for their slaves. They took care of them. Well, you know they'd have to. Why? Because that was their money. If they could produce, if they couldn't work, well, it was a detriment to them. And therefore, they would really take care of the slaves. They saw, I know they lived in grandmother Davis's. They had grandfather William Davis of Marriagefield, living at Ida Hill, had 2 beautiful slave quarters. They were big, and they took care of them. They saw that they were clothed properly. They saw they had medicines if they were sick. Well, if you didn't, you were out of luck. I mean, it was to your advantage that you took care of these slaves. I know we've heard weird stories of some people, probably they did, mistreat their slaves, but everybody didn't. Many people loved their slaves, and they really loved them. All I can tell you, and at the end of the Civil War, when my grandfather told his people that they were free, they could go wherever they wanted to. And they said, just where will we go? We have been happy here. We love it here. We love you. We love everything here. So everybody wasn't cruel to their slaves. I'm not saying some wasn't. I'm sure they would be like today. There are people who are cruel to everybody, people who have love too. We'll go back to our home here at Mount Pleasant. My grandfather had married a lady from Baltimore, a Miss Jenkins. Now, the Jenkinses of Baltimore had money. And don't forget I told you we were pioneer farmers. They had money. I will prove this to you. They built Corpus Christi. That's a big church in Baltimore. It's a very beautiful church. Today there is, from that family of Jenkinses, the retirement home near St. Agnes. It's a Jenkins Memorial, I think it's called. It's for retirement. All due for the results of their money. They had money. They were a Catholic family who lived in Baltimore, and they had asset to many profitable things. Well, anyway, Elizabeth Jenkins of Baltimore fell in love with this pioneer farmer who wore homemade clothes and patched pants. And he must have been tremendous for a person of her status to see something in somebody out here in the county. Out here. Well, they got married. And later on, of course, they had children. They had 4 children. Yes, I think there were 6. Let me see. Uncle Henry, Uncle Tom, my father, and Charlie, Josephine, and Ida. Yes, there were 6 children. 4 boys and 2 girls. Well, the war came on, the Civil War. Well, of course, Uncle Henry. I didn't know these uncles. Why? Because my father married late in life, and they had moved away when I came along, and so, but I knew of them, and I did attend the funeral of 2 of the aunts, but that was about all. Well, we're back. My grandfather is said to have been very very courteous, and you came into his home and he welcomed you. You knew you were welcome. I only hope and pray I could be just half as good as what I hear people have said about him. Because I liked when I meet him in the great beyond. I hope I do. I hope I get up those golden stairs. I hope to say, have I disappointed you too much? But I don't know. Well, anyway, my grandfather had a sister, Kitty, Aunt Kitty Faithful. Well, later she was married to Faithful. Well, Aunt Kitty lived here in Mount Pleasant with grandfather. Now, my father was not married, and he was a young boy. So, Aunt Kitty was courted, as you call those days, instead of going out with somebody, you were courted by a Union officer from Frederick. And she must have had a lot too on the ball, too. And father, my grandfather, which was Samuel, had a son, Henry, that was in the Army, in the Southern Army. And Henry had been home to get himself cleaned up. Well, that seems strange, but those days, I guess they did get lousy, got dirty clothes, needed new horses, new everything. Of course, grandfather here, he came home. He came down from the way of, now let me see, it's up there at, near outside of Frederick. It's a big place out there outside of Frederick on the Potomac. Oh, I'll think of it in a minute, I hope I do. Well, Brunswick, that's it, Brunswick. I think where the Potomac is up there at Brunswick. I think I'm right. And of course he crossed over from there to Virginia to that's how he had to go back, and that's I guess how he came in home. Anyway, he was home. He got washed up and all cleaned up. Clean clothes, clean everything, clean things to take back. I assume he took medicines too. I'm sure my grandmother would fill him up with everything she had for his health. And a new horse. My grandfather saw he got I guess one of the best horses he had. He would be for his son. So it seems as the story goes, he was here this, and he went up. I think it was either a Saturday or the Sunday. I am sure it had to be very close, because he had left. And Aunt Kitty, who later married this Union officer, Captain Faithful. Well, Captain Faithful was invited home here for dinner. And now, don't forget, here was a Union man coming into a Southern home. And, of course, my grandfather was at pins and needles, so worried that Aunt Kitty would somehow drop the word that her nephew had gone back to war, or had gone home, gone with clean clothes. But anyway, she was faithful. I guess the old story goes, blood is thicker than water. I guess that's the only phrase I can use. Of course, she didn't let on at all, and I'm told that grandfather was quite worried, but she was true blue. She didn't give away any information. So when that incident left, of course, there was a big relief in the house. Later on, Captain Faithful married Aunt Kitty, and I understand they were very happy. I don't know, they lived a ways up west of us somewheres. Well, now go back to my grandfather's, the Civil War. Bradley Johnson, like Robert E. Lee, was both men in the Army, U.S. Army, as then. Bradley Johnson, just like Lee, withdrew from that army and went to the call of Virginia, to the Southern Army. Both of them did, as you know that story. Well, of course, Bradley Johnson visited our home here, which we're very proud of. And yet I don't know whether my grandfathers, my uncles were proud about it at all. But anyway, it seems that the Union knew he was in this vicinity. And of course they knew my grandfather Davis had slaves. So of course he thought he'd be up there, because he lived beside the Patapsco River at Marriottsville. These, he had two places. He had the village and he had the farm of Ivy Hill. Well, they went up, who are they? I'm speaking of the Union people who were supposed to look around, I suppose you call it. Well, they went up there and they looked up the chimneys. They looked in all the nooks and crooks you could think of in the house. Up in the attic, they had looked for Bradley Johnson. Of course, he wasn't there. Where was he? Right down here at Mount Pleasant, up in our attic. Well, he was here. Why was he here, Bradley Johnson here? He was trying to check about destroying the bridges, bridges or anything that would bring the Union soldiers in with food to the south. Of course, that would be from Pennsylvania and all that area. Of course, now, don't forget, Patapsco River was much bigger than it is now. It's sad to think of it as a river of any importance today, but it was. Anyway, so Bradley Johnson was here at our house, up in our attic. Now, we had a nice attic. We had a floor in our attic, real floor, a real groove floor, and had windows too. I can't say about the sides, how well the sides were built, but anyway, that part I know is right. So the boys here, my grandfather's boys they were called. Of course, Henry was already in the Army. And of course there was Tom. Tom was like an underground railroad man, I guess you'd call it. Well, anyway, he carried messages from this area to Marriottsville, where they had an ice house up there in the village, and that these messages would be left somewhere in that ice house. And Uncle Tom was a tall, gangly, thin-looking farmer who people thought of those days didn't have brains. Well, Uncle Tom showed he had a lot of brains, but later on in life he showed that because he had made his fortune. Not a big fortune, but he made his mark in life. Well, one time, Uncle Tom got caught up there, and they put him in some kind of a place to hold him. When they came and investigated him, they said, how could that gangly, thin, no-count farmer's son know anything? So let him go. Didn't know what he'd done. So we did play that little part. Well, anyway, then Bradley was here. Bradley Johnson was here. And of course he had to get cleaned up too. And of course my grandmother, she must have been one of those spick and span souls, I'm sure she was. So that he got cleaned up, washed up, and the boys had to carry up. Now we didn't have hot water in the house, of course, it had to be heated. And had to take these big tubs upstairs, up in the attic, for him to take a bath in. He got a bath in a big tub, big wash tub like. And this took a lot of water. And the boys they grumbled about carrying up the water, but they better not grumble too much, because up they carried that water, and he got really nice and clean and got all straightened out. But he was here surveying what bridges would be destroyed, or how they would be destroyed, or what. He was surveying over the look all up and down this Patapsco River. Now, how far up, I do not know. But I know he was here at Woodstock, and I do know he went as far as Marriottsville, and I can't answer too much more. Why do I know? Because it's associated with our family. Well, anyway, when Bradley was ready to go, in the meanwhile, I will have to tell you this. My grandmother destroyed our Bible, the Brown's Bible. I belong to the DARs here in Catonsville, America. Caton, so does Frances, my sister. And one time they were asking about Bibles, and of course they thought we would have a family Bible. And when we told them ours was destroyed, well, I tell you, they didn't think much of us at first. But I said, and Frances said too, I don't blame her. She'd given one son to the South, and she had 3 more, and they were etching to go. They wanted to go, because they asked, Uncle Tom asked Bradley Johnson about joining the Army. He says, right now you're doing more good for us than you can think of, doing what you're doing. And of course there was Frank, and there was Charlie. Grandmother destroyed it. The whole Bible, everything. I don't blame her. Blood is thicker than water. She knew that even the Union could come in and they could take over if they saw the boys were at a reasonable age to join the Army, they would be taken. So I agreed with her. I'd have destroyed it too. And I don't blame her. I'm sorry we don't have a family Bible. Yet I think she was very courageous, very brave to do what she did, and I admire her for it. Well, so Bradley left us, but they searched for him at Grandfather Davis's place, and here he was in Grandfather Brown's place, and that seemed to be the thing with us. Of course, we did not have slaves. Let's see why. I told you we were pioneer farmers. We didn't have that money. We were pioneer farmers, which meant you were poor farmers, that's all. But we did love the soil, and so there you are with that. Then after the war, my father and his his brothers, yes, because Uncle Tom hadn't married yet, and Uncle Henry hadn't either. Uncle Henry married a lady from Marysville or Collins. They moved to Washington. And somehow because of transportation, when my father died, we didn't have the transportation. The family just, well, we didn't hear much from. We didn't hear from. We understand one time we think they came back here, Uncle Henry, but Mother, we were not here. And when he got a car or something, he drove in and looked around. Of course, when the 2 girls, my father married, he married late in life. He married a lady who was not real young either. She was in her 30s. So we just seemed, this Frank Brown's children seemed to be out of line with the rest of the children. The Uncle Tom's daughter, when my mother married, she said to her, Louise, I'm not going to call you Aunt Louise, I'm just going to call you plain Louise because we're too much of near the age, which was true. And so I think that happened with all of our relatives. And there we have very little connections. Of course, now all of them are gone. And we were interested in the South, but I'm glad things turned out as it was, because to be united is much better. And so that ends our story for the, if you can think of something else you might ask, I don't know.
Now, your grandfather married Elizabeth
Jenkins of Baltimore.
And your father married?
By the way, this is interesting. My grandfather, the Browns, were Presbyterians. And he was the first time that Catholicism came into the Brown family was through Elizabeth Jenkins. And I still say he must have had an awful lot. He must have had so much. I am sure he did. Everyone later on I heard speak of him said he did. And my grandfather, Davis, he was a Methodist, and he married Sally E. Gorsuch of Sykesville, who had Gorsuch's switch, and she was the Catholic. And therefore, we had Catholicism came in to our family through the 2 grandfathers. And Grandfather Brown was buried over here in the Brown Cemetery on Good Fellowship. He asked, that's where he wanted to be buried. Before he died, sometime before he died, my grandmother Elizabeth Jenkins Brown must have been very generous. I'm sure she was, being Jenkins of Baltimore, and grandfather loving her dearly because he had to, and she had to love him. Of course, she was very kind, I'm told, to many of the people around here who was in trouble. Now, don't ask me what they were. I imagine food or anything else, and he would grant it. He wanted to die in the religion that his wife was in, because he felt that she was it, and she must have been it. Being Elizabeth Jenkins of Baltimore, I know it was it. So then Grandfather Davis was very kind and very generous too. He owned Marriottsville, and he owned Ivy Hill, which was a big farm, little out in Howard County. These were in Howard County, and Ivy Hill is now owned by the state. McKeldin Park has bought Ivy Hill, and Grandfather Davis did not really become a Catholic. They were buried in Loudon Park. They had big cemeteries, old-fashioned cemeteries in Loudon Park. Grandfather Brown was buried over here in the Brown Cemetery, but grandmother died when she was 75. She did not want to be buried in that cemetery. Well, our church had been started, and they were starting a cemetery. She wanted to be buried in a Catholic cemetery. So she had her husband taken up and was buried, and we have the lot. My sister and I will finish out the lot of 8 in that cemetery. He was brought to St. Alphonsus Church Cemetery, and one of the first to be buried there, probably the first, and of course she was buried there too. So that ends our story of that line.
And then your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Davis. She was S. Louise Davis Brown, and she was a daughter of William Davis of Ivy Hill.
Okay.
And they had a big family too. Now, what has happened to all of us? You think Catholicism coming in? Well, to my knowledge, my 2 aunts did not marry. They had no children. Uncle Henry did, and Uncle Tom did. Uncle Charlie died younger. He was a crippled. He'd become a cripple. Something happened to his leg. I guess he broke it, and of course didn't know how to fix those legs. Then he was limped. I guess you'd say a little bit short-legged, I assume. I don't know. So he did not marry. He was very gifted, I'm told. He was quite a gifted as a carpenter, cabinet maker. I cannot tell you any more about that. I don't know. So when my father married, he bought out my Uncle Tom, my Aunt Ida and Aunt Josephine, and Henry's people, children. No, Henry was still alive, so he was there, and it was a tough time. But my father bought them out, and my mother first married and came here, but then she left, so he made finally agreements that he was the sole owner of the place. And so we've held it on. And to my knowledge, my Uncle Tom married a very, very aristocratic woman from southern Maryland, Carver County. The Bruins of Carver County were, well, they're supposed to be way up there, if you wish to call it. I don't call it today way up there, but they are a time that people said they were way up there. Well, she married my grandfather, my Uncle Tom, in the Catholic Church, but then she had her only child baptized, but the girl followed the mother's religion. And so I suppose really only ones that are remain Catholicism. I don't know about my Uncle Henry's people. I can't answer. I don't know. We have not been able to make contact, tried, but we didn't succeed. So there we are. And my mother's people, again from her side, there's just two of them that have kept Catholicism. My mother had Uncle Will, who married a very fine lady from Virginia. Well, they are. Two sisters did not marry, and they're dead now. Of course, everyone's dead. Another uncle, he had two uncles. One of them, Uncle Richard, who was in politics in the county here, he married.
That was Richard Davis?
Yes, a W, that meant Richard Davis of William. His children were not, they were Episcopalians. So, I guess out of all the families, Tom, on my my mother's side, has Catholicism there still, and they do have a couple children that married and have children. It just seems that we're at the ends of everything. I don't know.
Well, let's talk a little bit then about the changes in this area. Before we were talking about the inn that was at the corner of St. John's Lane and Route 40.
Now, yes, it was quite an interesting one. Of course, see, the Carrolls entered on what you call now 144. Their entrance was out there. And, of course, this inn, that was Log Cabin Inn. It was quite very interesting. It was land bought from the Hammonds, who later, Miss Hammond then, Mary Rebecca Hammond, married a Lasovich, who came from Italy, who was a count in Italy, but emigrated here as a real estate person, and of course gave up all title to everything else. And he was quite a fine real estate man here. He was here many times, not many times, but several times, interested in if we would ever sell, would we contact him. Of course we said we would, but we didn't sell, of course. Then let's see where else the big interesting things happened. Then we had really down on 144, a Hardman has a very fine, really a fine motel in which people came, and really was very fine. Then he went up and built up on Route 40. That was the new place, and he built what is called now, today is known as St. John's Plaza. He owned that, and he had wonderful rooms there, wonderful places for people. That really was really wonderful. I mean,
they had a restaurant and rooms.
Everything there, very fine. He had a restaurant down on 144 that was very good, and he really was good. His daughter he had two children. No, I don't know. He had a daughter that today has married Myers. Oh gosh, I can't think of the girl's name, first name. And she lives up here. They bought the Maxwell, Robert Maxwell's old place, or known as Roland Maxwell later place. Now he was a county treasurer at one time, and she goes to the Lutheran Church on Chatham Road, and she lives up here. Now she is the daughter of Mr. Hardman. And I have to think of her first name. My gosh, I know it so well. Of course, I can find it out in a second here in a minute. Let me see.
We also saw the cemetery up here on off of Old Frederick Road or Route 99.
Now, I don't know too much about that, the Fox Cemetery. I don't know too much about it. Now, all I can tell you, we can get, I think, that there's information maybe from the Historical Society might be able to give us some little more information about that old family cemetery. We had quite a few cemeteries around here. They have all been destroyed.
There's the one across from the Bethany Fire Station, too, now.
Now that, we're very proud of that that is something to be very proud of. That's a little colored cemetery.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes, it is. And I am very proud of those people who are taking care of that little cemetery. Once every year, it is cleaned up beautifully. It has a fence around it, and of course, there beside somebody,
Mr. and Mrs. Jett.
Jet lives there, and they are wonderful people. They keep it clean all around, and so it is a pleasure for the other people to come out to keep their lot clean, and it makes fun. Now, that is a colored cemetery. Now, St. Paul's Church in Atlantic City has a cemetery. You would never know where it is. It is on the banks, I guess you call it the Tiber River, up there right across from, you come out of Rogers Avenue. Carter's, big
The bus company.
bus company owns that land on, I'll say this side, but along the other side, there was, across that little stream, all along that bank, believe it or not, you cannot imagine it, but there were people buried there, and I can remember as when I went to high school down there, that it was, I would say, in the 1920s, of course, I graduated in 22, people were still buried there. A good friend of ours, who was Senator Joseph L. Donovan's mother, was buried there. She wanted to be buried by her husband there, but to my knowledge, she was the last one that I knew that was buried there. Of course, I know so little. But there was a cemetery there, and you couldn't find it now. I'm sure if you went there, I doubt if you'd even see the tombstones, because they'd be covered up unless you dug down.
So
I'm
it's
sure.
right near Rogers.
Right across,
Rogers Avenue
right
and
across from
Carter's
Rogers
bus.
Avenue. Go over that little stream, and then all along the bank, back a little bit and there was a schoolhouse built up there too. It was a colored schoolhouse. It's gone too. But that was the St. Paul's old cemetery, and I doubt if there are many people that knows about that cemetery. Why? Because the richer people who went to St. Paul's was buried in Baltimore, in the new cathedral, somewhere like that. And therefore, I doubt very much if many people know about that. But it is a cemetery there. I want to ask the Howard County Historical Society. Now we have, of course, there was over on the Davises across from us, Richard Davis, my great uncle. There was a cemetery there. I don't know whose it was. I cannot tell you. I know back across on the east of us, there was a little cemetery there. I think somebody tried to say they thought it was Davis's, but if they were, I cannot tell you who they were. I do not know. There was, of course, the Brown Cemetery here on Good Fellowship. I don't know who's going to be buried there now. It looks a wreck, but there is a cemetery there. And I like to tell you one thing about these cemeteries. Some of these cemeteries. I'll speak here at the Brown Cemetery. They had a stone wall all around it, and you could get in there, but the wall was built so that horses and cattle and all couldn't get in it. Now, how was it built? I think like this. One wall came out in front of the other, and you went in like a little alley-like, and it was too small for any animals to get in, such as horses or cows. Now, I'm not going to say about something lower than that. That'd be ridiculous. But I do know that over here at Good Fellowship. Now, who's going to be buried there? The Lord only knows. Who's going to keep it up now? I don't know. One of my Revolutionary ancestors were buried in there. Of course, they didn't have those days. The graves weren't walled up, so everything's down to ground, as you would say. And then we had one in Katie's Lane. A Revolutionary person there was buried, but I can't tell you who. I don't know. There's this old tombstone, I'm told, that was resurrected somewhere off of the ground, and I haven't even been back there. I don't know. But there were old family lots around here, graveyards. And, well,
Now, the cemetery across from the Bethany fire station,
Yes.
you said is the black
black,
cemetery.
little black cemetery,
Where,
yeah.
where did they come from?
I have not decided. We think, now I don't know, we think that they might have been part of where the colored people of this area, maybe the slaves, I can't answer, were buried there. But whoever has any ancestors there have certainly done a beautiful job, and coming out from where, I don't know.
I know one year the Boy Scouts cleaned that
Did
up.
they?
That
Oh,
was
and
one of
maybe,
their
and maybe the
projects.
Boy Scouts did all this.
They
Maybe
were
they have been
trying
doing.
to set some of the
Oh,
tombstones
that was
up.
wonderful.
I think it was a project. from
Well,
the
I think,
Boy
oh, that could,
Scouts.
then I am wrong. Then it wasn't, but I do know it is black people that were buried there.
Well, we had always assumed that it was sort of attached
Uh-huh.
to the Jets' home, but then when the Boy Scouts went
No.
in there, they said, no,
No.
that was not.
No, it was not there.
theirs.
Now, the Jets' property, they bought that off of, my gosh, now who was that man? Well, that was a big home. Their house, their front part of their house is very much similar to our front of our home at Mount Pleasant here. So therefore, it was built at the time of the Civil War. Joe,
Is that the place near the high school?
yes.
That, it used to be, there was Owens on the mailbox, I don't.
No, that's another place.
Oh, that's right.
That's up higher. That is as far as I know. One time our, somehow, some relative, I don't know, connected with the family, our family, had lived in that house for a while, and then where they went over to Guilford in a big home there, I don't know the whole story. I don't know that. Francis might know that, and I can't tell you much about
So
that.
the house next to the high school then is about as old as your place here?
Yes, that is the front part of it, yes. Because Joe, now what is that name? Joe, man? Gosh, he was big friends of my uncle's. Oh, for the land's sake, isn't it wicked when you forget these names? And I have.
You were telling me too about the log cabin that's off of Route 99.
Yes. That was
That's-
bought from the Hammonds. That was bought from the Hammonds, and I don't know who owned it. Oh, they had a nice, they would have big things there. I mean, they really had parties. People would give parties and would give it there. It was really very good. It truly was. I don't know what's happened now. It's gone now, I think. It's gone.
Well,
I
the
can't-
one log cabin on the curve, as you're going around
Yes.
that big curve, they renovated that.
Oh.
And there are some people in there living there. Their name is Williams.
Oh, I see.
But I know when they bought it, I think they bought it at auction.
I'm
There
sure
was
they
an old
might
man
have.
living in there.
I'm sure they might have. I can tell you the food was there at that one time, known as log cabin. And who owned it, I cannot tell you. I don't know. I should, but I don't.
It's hard to remember all of the
I
little
do, though
details.
my sister Frances would be able to, if she could remember now.
Now, the farm across 99 from you, did you say that was the Davis farm?
Right, yes, this is Richard Davis, yes.
Now that, nobody lives there anymore, do you?
No, that they sold it to several people. One of the people ran Mr. Ramsburg, the two boys, I think, two brothers bought it, I think. Lee and Alva. I'm not too sure, but I know the Ramsburgs owned it. Then they sold it to a group of people, I say a couple people, maybe four, something like that, out of Washington. And then out of that area, I don't know where they lived over there. Then, in return, now they've sold it to Kenneth Warfield of Dayton. Now he has bought, that was 300 acres there, almost 300 acres, because 78, there was 300, I think there was 230 acres they bought because 70 acres was from your entrance over there, Maple Drive. I think Turf Valley Man has bought that. That's
Mangio.
Well, Pisario or something, I don't know who. That was also my uncle's land, too. And he gave it to a nephew, but their nephew sold his place. It was back, a big house back. He gave him an out, sold it, left it to them, and the heirs and they had a right of way out, but, well, it was Tom Davis's, and he just...
Now, I think my kids remember going to school with some children that lived across from here, back in that farm.
Yes, let's see, who could they be? I know they did.
Was there an accident back there where the father was killed in a tractor accident or something like that? I had heard that
Wait a minute.
story.
Now, you could hear, now, let me see. Peggy and Johnson's, I think the Johnsons lived there, I think. Peggy, who used to, she had several brothers, and there was a big family of them, and the father and mother, and they lived back in the old house there. There's no house. See, the old original house was a beautiful big one. They were back off the road back, and it burnt down. Then Aunt Julia, who was this great aunt of ours, she rebuilt the house, but kept it back in the old place where, because her nephew wanted it back there. She knew he was going to get the place, which he did. And he didn't keep it very long. He sold it, for goodness sakes. There are people more interested in money than other things, but that's another story. Peggy, I remember Peggy and Andy coming over here and working for my sister Frances. And yes, they went to Bethany School, I know that. They were nice people, very nice people. Then they left, and then somebody else, their father died, and they left. And then somebody else lived back, and then the house finally got burned up. They burned it down. Who burned? I think the county finally burned it down. It was a shabble, and they, for fire reasons of practice or whatnot, it was burned down. It's this land has changed a great deal, a lot. Of course, a group of people up here that did own where we call it, Waverly. Waverly now, as you all know it now, is only the house part, but the land part is not, is owned by a group of people, I think from Ellicott City, I think maybe from Taylor's, up there Taylor's, a group of doctors, maybe 3, I don't know. They own that, and of course they have kept it for, hopingly, to make, profit, but it hasn't done that just yet. Well, it could have, but they need a lot of work on the soil now because it needs draining and all that. But that's another story again.
Well, I noticed there's a little mailbox as you're going through Woodstock. On the right-hand side, it says Woodstock Hotel, and there's a big white building behind that. And I wondered if it really was a hotel, and no.
No. Is that at the hill nearly of Woodstock?
Where you're starting to go down the hill.
Yes. My golly day, no indeed. Lillian Null lived there for a long time. her father bought it when they had a store in Woodstock, and his wife died, and she asked him to get the children out of Woodstock, so he came up on the hill, and it was a big, big house. That was in one of these old places again around here. No, I think there's several families living in that now, and they call it a hotel.
Oh, I
think
see.
they do. It's a several families.
I just thought maybe it had
No,
a hotel.
we had never. Now there were people here in the 1900s. I'll say 1900 and something. Still running, I guess. I don't know why. Finished?
No.
My gosh. In around the 1900s, there a lot of people came out from Baltimore, and we had several big houses. We had actually on that top of that hill where you saw that place is called a hotel, was a big house, and the Giddings had it, and there's another one's across now. It's burnt down, but they built a little house there, over there, and then back across the road again. There's another compound of 3 or 4 little houses. Well, there was a big house back there, and people used to come out from Baltimore for the summer, and people around would take them, you know, and then once you got there to a place, well, you came back next year. And how did they come up? They came up on the train, and they could go back whenever they wanted to Baltimore, and it was a nice little, they might come for the whole summer, or they might come for a month, or they might come for a week. I wouldn't know. It just depends. It just depends how much you had to. This used to be quite a little popular area for people from Baltimore coming out for a little trip out, vacation. And they would come to these very big homes. They were very gracious people. We had some very gracious people around here, and people enjoyed it. There was another way they could make a little extra dollar. Now, I'm very proud of a house on Woodstock Road. Let's see, it's the second house from the post office on the left